I didn't grow up poor, but I grew up careful. Careful with money, careful with joy, careful with wanting things. For a long time, I thought that made me mature, responsible, even strong. Until one day I stood in a store holding something I genuinely needed, something I could easily afford, and my hands started shaking. Not because I didn't have money, but because buying something new made me feel unsafe. That was the moment I realized this fear was never about money. This is what trauma looks like. For years, I avoided buying new things. New clothes, new shoes, new furniture, even small upgrades that would have made my life easier. I told myself I was minimalist, practical, not materialistic. People even praised me for it. But the truth was quieter and heavier than all those labels. I was afraid. I was afraid that if I bought something new, I would lose it. Afraid that comfort would be taken away. Afraid that enjoying something meant it would soon disappear. So I trained myself not to want, not to hope, not to attach. Letting go before loss happened felt safer than loving something and having it taken away. This fear didn't start suddenly. It grew slowly and invisibly, shaped by years of instability, moving from place to place, living in rented rooms, existing in spaces that never felt permanent. When life keeps teaching you that nothing lasts, your brain adapts. It learns to survive by expecting loss. I lived in rented rooms for years, places that constantly reminded you this is not yours. Don't scratch the wall. Don't drill holes. Don't change anything. And after a while, that message doesn't stay on the walls. It moves inside you. You stop changing things, not just in the room, but in yourself. I bought secondhand whenever possible, not because I loved vintage, but because if something was already worn, losing it wouldn't hurt as much. I kept clothes until they were threadbare phones, until they barely worked furniture that never really fit my space or my body. New things felt like promises, and promises felt dangerous. Every purchase came with guilt. Do you really need this? What if something happens next month? What if rent goes up? What if you have to move again? What if you regret it? What if comfort makes you weak? What if stability makes you careless? People saw discipline. I felt anxiety. People saw simplicity. I felt fear. People saw control. I felt constant readiness for loss. Trauma doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it disguises itself as logic, as responsibility, as wisdom. But at its core, it is fear pretending to protect you. I noticed the difference when I watched other people buy things easily. Friends upgrading their lives without hesitation. Buying furniture decorations, things that made their spaces feel lived in. They would say things like, "You deserve it," and my mind would quietly respond, "Not yet. It's not safe." Wait for what I didn't know. Trauma taught me to delay joy, to postpone comfort, to believe that rest is a reward, not a right. It taught me that wanting more was risky, that stability could vanish overnight, and that the safest way to live was to keep everything temporary. Buying new things felt like declaring permanence, like saying I'll be here long enough to enjoy this. And my nervous system didn't believe that sentence. So I stayed in survival mode long after the danger had passed. Even when my life became calmer, even when I earned more, even when nothing bad was actually happening, my body stayed alert. My mind stayed cautious. Trauma didn't leave just because the situation improved. That is one of the cruelest things about trauma. It lingers. It shapes your choices. It shrinks your world. It convinces you that safety must always be earned and can always be taken away. The turning point wasn't dramatic. There was no breakdown, no big moment. I needed to buy something simple, nothing luxurious, just functional. I stood there for a long time, heart racing, rehearsing excuses in my head. And then a quiet question surfaced. Why does this feel like a threat? That question changed everything. I realized I wasn't afraid of spending money. I was afraid of trusting life, afraid of believing that good things could stay, afraid of letting myself settle. Trauma had trained me to live as if everything could collapse at any moment. So I built a life that was easy to dismantle. Few belongings, few attachments, few signs of permanence. I thought that made me strong. In reality, it kept me small. Survival is not the same as living. New things symbolized hope, continuity, a future version of myself who would still be here. And trauma told me not to believe in that version. Trauma told me to stay ready to leave. This fear shaped how I saw myself, as someone who shouldn't get too comfortable, someone who shouldn't take up space, someone who should always be prepared for loss. Over time, my environment started to reflect that belief. My space felt unfinished. My life felt paused, like I was constantly waiting for permission to begin. Healing didn't mean suddenly buying everything new. It didn't mean spending money recklessly or proving something to anyone. It meant questioning the fear, gently, patiently, asking whether my decisions were coming from the present or from the past. Sometimes buying something new became an act of defiance, not against money, but against the belief that I didn't deserve stability, against the idea that comfort was dangerous. I learned that trauma is not just about what happened to you. It's about what your nervous system learned to expect: instability, loss, disappearance. And healing is teaching yourself something new, that safety can exist, that comfort doesn't always vanish, that you are allowed to invest in the life you are living now. This story isn't really about objects. It's about self-worth, about believing you are allowed to stay, allowed to enjoy, allowed to build a life that doesn't feel temporary. If you are afraid to buy new things, ask yourself why. Not with judgment, not with shame, but with curiosity. Is it really about money, or is it about fear? Because trauma doesn't always look like pain. Sometimes it looks like restraint, hesitation, a life kept intentionally small. And sometimes healing begins with something simple and quiet. Allowing yourself to choose something new, not because you need it, but because you are finally learning that you are allowed to have it.